Right, thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Bonjour à tous. It's a pleasure to present here for you some insights on sustainability. Sustainability is an important theme for all in the food system, for all dairy chains, and for all involved in the food supply chain, in fact. I would like to tackle a little bit sustainability by the angle of the dairy industry this morning. And typically, I will give several examples, but they are valid for meat, they are valid for bakery, they are valid for many other food sectors, in fact. Very quick introduction on who is GIRA. GIRA is a food and drink industry specialist. We are experts with a vast food chain experience. What we do is dairy, but also meat, bakery, food service. And we have a targeted approach, a forward-looking approach, because we also do some forecasts. And we have an overall approach of all the questions you may have on the food supply chain, knowing all the actors playing in. And from 50 years, we have been studying the markets and providing answers to you. So we're welcome to have any questions you may have. Our website is girafood.com, and you're welcome to ask any questions you may have following this presentation. Or come to me at the end if you'd like to know more. Sustainability is really a core issue to tackle on the long term. That's why many players have understood this and are now tackling it on the long term with several years plans, with roadmaps and things to tackle on the long term. Let me show you why. It's at the heart of preoccupations of consumers. Many know it. Of course, now in many countries, we are more talking about price, inflation, and cost of goods. But consumers are ranking planetary health as their #1 concerns. Sustainability is not just a Wall Street issue. It's something, it's a top driver for consumers. And it really clinches the deal when some consumers are actually choosing between products. You have to know that this is some of the claims we gathered from top dairies this year. They say the young generation is strongly pushing for sustainability. They say the consumer will favor dairy producers who have this concern incorporated into their companies. They say they favor suppliers with corporate social responsibility and with real practices ongoing on this theme. That means that if you do not act, you are soon going to be late on this theme. You are soon going to stay behind. And many top suppliers have had to take the train and act. Of course, we can see this as being too expensive, or we don't know what it's all about. And in fact, half of the consumers that you ask, that you survey, still say that they think they don't have enough information. So there's a lot to be done on information, on communication, and simply on understanding what sustainability is all about in your companies, in your food system, and in your own countries. If we take a little bit the drivers of sustainability, they are only one of many others that drive food developments and food innovations. Typically, we had health and wellness for years, driving new products. We have now also animal welfare. Yes, definitely, providing better conditions to cows, but also to other animals that we breed for their meat or for their milk is a key element. And sustainability comes a little bit on top of these 3 pillars. It's one of these aspects that you have to respect, that are not the only ones, but that make up a whole bunch of things. So typically, these are the key drivers that we follow and that we see that are driving the demand, for example, for protein alternatives. All those new plant-based products that you see that are now going to compete against dairy products, this is where they are stemming from. This is the driving forces of these developments. So the false milk, the imitating cheeses, the false yogurts, replacing milk with almonds, coconut, soya, of course, but also rice and other wheat and many other ingredients. These are the pillars driving these developments of these new products. In fact, we have asked top dairy companies in Europe, and among them dairy leaders, what are in fact their concerns regarding sustainability. And the first thing is to define what we are talking about. Many people say profit, many people say planet, people, and profit, but in fact what we find is that the key words should be profit, planet, and people, because this is the reality of how people take things in order. Then you also see incorporated in the sustainability field energy, so reducing the energy use, reducing the carbon emissions, better using the water, better using the packaging, better sourcing of your products, respecting animal welfare, that I said before, and having a better diversity as well. Food waste is an emerging theme that many companies are trying to tackle as well, because this will be asked more and more by the consumers once they realize a lot can be done at consumer and retail level. And plant-based health and nutrition is always supporting this still. So you see, it's a long list, quite hard to define, quite tricky to grab in all one place. So sustainability is quite a large theme and something difficult to tackle at once. Why do they struggle? Because they need to communicate differently, because they need to communicate more, because they need to have a proactive attitude, not wait until the next crisis so that they don't have to battle against consumers, but anticipate. And also, they feel the difficulty to start facing a growing number, in fact, of issues to tackle on the long term. Some sort this issue by going with collaboration. Collaborations means let's take our suppliers hands in hand. Let's go and see universities, of course, and also our suppliers, but also, in fact, NGOs. NGOs, some deliver the responsibility of their carbon emissions or water usage, all certain aspects of what I've mentioned, to NGOs so that they can help them tackle these issues. Of course, the major one could always be seen that all these actions will require investments, and investment often means additional costs. And the big question now for many of you in the room, and also as consumers and as large companies, is who will pay? Who will pay for these actions? Probably a large share and a large group of the supply chain, but the main challenge will be how things will be spread along the chain. I said sustainability is to be tackled on the long term, and it's also to be tackled all along the supply chain. Now you have to realize, before maybe just companies or large companies or certain companies were being scrutinized for not respecting things or for not being quick enough. Now it's the entire supply chain that is under scrutiny, not only dairies and factories, but in fact from feed to fork. If you take the example of the carbon footprint for milk, from the cow to the yogurt, let's say, in your fridge, this is how it looks like in terms of carbon footprint split by main steps. It's 90 to 95% of carbon footprint happening at the farm level. This is unfortunately a reality. To produce milk, it's mainly happening at the cow emission and methane and CO2 emissions. This is why the power is in the hands, of course, mostly of dairies, of retailers, and of distributors, and probably not in the hands of thousands of farmers in each of our countries. But many large dairies will have to go back to the farms and act and put programs in place and put incentives and put investments, because otherwise this 90% will not be manageable and will not be reduced. By the way, among these 90 to 95%, you see my share of enteric fermentation is around 43%. That's the burps from the cows. You also have manure management, many programs on that, and feed production 21% as well. What I'm saying is that we used to focus, oh, it's a food produced by factories, so it must be energy, it must be water, it must be transport, waste management, packaging. Yes, these have all a significant footprint, but altogether they go and put a sum of around 5 to 7 to 10 maximum % in the dairy sector. This means that when investment bankers, when financial people, when investors are going to blame those Nestlé, Danone, and many other Arla Foods and Friesland for their sustainability actions, they are going to indirectly force the farmers to act. And farmers will only act if they have serious, good incentives for them to play a role at. Of course, not to forget us as consumers all the time eating dairy products, from cheese, yogurt, milk, ice cream, or whatever you like. We have a responsibility to be better educated, not to waste food if it's still good to go. So you have innovations like Too Good To Go that delivers products that are still okay. On the official date, they should go in the bin, but in fact, they smell okay, they are good to be eaten. Well, let's continue to eat them and let's not throw them away. And just a little thing, I said food waste. Food waste is a real emerging theme. Food waste can account to 17% of total production at the world level for dairy products and 12% at European level for dairy products. In fact, among those 17% at world level, it's 5.5% that is the responsibility of the final consumer. So what I'm saying is there's a serious possibility by educating to not waste, and therefore to not waste the product, but also the energy, the transport, and also the raw materials and all the added value that has been put into the products. So, in a way, this is your global picture. Please don't forget that when we're putting the pressure on the dairy companies, we're putting the pressure on the entire dairy supply chain, and we are going to force dairy companies to act also towards farms. Now, how is this moving on? Typically, from qualitative targets, I will reduce my water usage by minus 20%. Well, what does it mean? From when to how much, to where, which factories, which geographies, which years? It's very vague, in fact, to quantitative measures. Now, there are really international methodologies in place that exist, that national and international companies are taking into consideration, and they are not just writing one sentence in a report just to prove you that they are getting better environmentally speaking, but they are using now ISO, International Standardization Organization, or from the IPCC, the International Organization on Climate, or FAO, well known for food, or GHG protocol. So these are one of the four, you pick the one you want, but there are typically no excuses left not to be acting because you can now measure things. Things are now measurable. If I just take a few examples of some companies you may know in the dairy sector, Arla Foods, Danone, Sodial, Valio in Finland, Friesland Campina, of course. These are all acting using this methodology for their own programs, for their factories, for their farmers, for their own distributors and suppliers. So once we said there is no more excuse, we're going from qualitative, a little bit vague, to quantitative measures, and we know what we're doing. Well, what's changing for the entire food supply chain? What does it mean? It means that once you can measure things, you can also obtain a grade, a rank, a list of companies. Some will be best in class, top level, and some will be not moving, not considering the facts, and at the bottom of your list. That's why I'm saying companies are now being ranked based on a global score. If you just take one example, I don't know if you know this company, EcoVadis, but there will be additional players, not just this one. It's using 21 corporate social responsibility criteria divided in environmental, social, human rights, ethics, responsible purchasing. And basically, it's giving you a type of score based on what I just mentioned and gives you an overall score on these type of things. Are you good? Are you at the top of the list? Are you right in the middle? Or are you at the bottom? It means that whenever you're buying or supplying to any company, you will probably now be listed in this kind of catalog without asking. They will do it for you. They don't have to come and ask. If you want to be maybe better positioned, you'd better in fact give them the information so they can provide a better picture of your company. But this is the reality. Companies now will be graded upon some eco score, if you wish, some global score, and companies will also choose their suppliers based on these gradings. That means that one day we will end up probably on the packaging of some food dairy products with a full traceability of milk or other ingredients, thinking about meat, thinking about bakery, from the wheat to the croissant, from the milk to the yogurt, typically from the meat to any processed food. We will know the environmental footprint because all these companies will have gradings running. So, what can we do specifically for dairy? Knowing now that there are typically some solutions to reduce methane emission. I showed you that a lot is happening at the cow level in the farms, and a lot has to be done on the cow level. Well, we could always think about reducing the number of animals. That's the obvious thing to do, and that is going to happen in certain EU countries, significantly, in fact, in some countries. But we can also think about feed additives, about cultures, about seaweed, about vaccines. There are many things running. If we just take the example of a New Zealand company, Fonterra, this is what they used to present. They are focusing on several aspects to reduce the methane emissions. They're focusing on seaweed. They have a research going on Asparagopsis seaweed in cow's feed. They're focusing on partnering with DSM with their Bovaer product, which is a feed additive that reduces the amount of methane that is emitted from the cow when it's in the shed. They're thinking of natural cultures. So this is similar to kombucha microorganisms that can modify the digestive system and in fact reduce the enteric emission of the cow. They're thinking about potential vaccines to reduce methane emissions, so vaccinating the cows. They're thinking about other rocket science options, let's say. So a lot of R&D is taking place at the moment, and some companies are testing early solutions. I can tell you there's a lot going on, and if the early movers take the advantage, typically they will be the ones able to claim significant decreases of methane emissions. On top of what I just described, unfortunately, stricter measures are coming from the EU. There is EU regulation that will force the milk supply chain to change. If I just take the examples of the Netherlands government has typically announced objective to decrease the nitrogen emissions by 2030, forcing a decrease of number of farms by around 50,000. So we are planning on having 50,000 farms disappearing, either closing by themselves or being bought by the government. So this is the results simply because new environmental measures, in this case on nitrogen, but in other European countries, could be highly threatening the number of cows. So if we want to avoid to see our agriculture farmers quickly being pushed out of the market because there are strict regulations they cannot respect, we'd better find other solutions, as I mentioned just before, so that they can prove that they are actually reducing their emissions on the existing cows. On top of that, just the example in the Netherlands is quite remarkable. Banks, such as Rabobank in this case, are no longer putting money into farms which are close to protected natural 2000 environments. What does it mean? It means that farms which are going to be in a delicate situation regarding sustainability are not going to be favored anymore for further investments in the future. That means that probably in some countries it will be difficult to produce more milk in the future, and we are already seeing German milk production and French milk production decreasing on the long term. We have projections and forecasts that in the EU there will be no longer a milk production increase on the next 5 years anymore, because two major producing countries, Germany and France, are actually on the downside for the long term. So, some key takeaways for my short but intense presentation for this first day this morning. Sustainability is a core issue to tackle on the long term. So, really, I would say definition is widening. There are more things to tackle. Farms are more at the center of attention because of their carbon footprint and animal welfare and other issues, of course. Typically, sustainability now involves the entire supply chain. I told you about food waste on the consumer side, farms, processors in the middle as well. Rating and comparing companies becomes possible with the arrival of new players. Remember that EcoVadis example? You are, as a food company, going to be on their catalog. And if you don't act on sustainability, you will progressively go down the list. Who will pay for these changes? I don't have the definitive answer because it's up to the supply chain to agree. There are different paths available. Think about the carbon credit at the farms and other things like that. And typically, I must ask you now, are you ready for this change that concerns the entire dairy foods, the entire food chain? Really, it's been a pleasure to share some insights. We have much more in-house. And thank you very much for your attention.